he was in his late 40s. I immediately related to the story. And his team had a lot of younger guys. I related to that too. And during one game, the man was playing third base, and a line drive was hit right over his head. And he jumped as high as he could, but he couldn't quite get his glove on the ball. So it went into the outfield. At the end of the inning, everybody was heading for the dugout, and the left fielder caught up with them. And the outfielder held up his thumb and his finger, and just a couple inches apart, and he said, "That much, that much." And so this older third baseman replied, he goes, "I know, I almost got it." And the younger friend laughed, and he said back, "No, I mean that's how far you jumped off the ground, that much, that much." And unfortunately, I can relate to that as well. Now, when it came to softball, the veteran player, he needed these youngins to play with him and encourage him. And when it comes to our spiritual lives, we are not on our own, right? We have encouragement and prayer for others. We're supposed to do that as the body of Christ, build one another up. As John said, be present. If we can't be present physically, we're present in our prayers. But we're the ones who control our lives. So if we want to go higher, we need to jump higher. And here Jesus, I think he's continuing in our passage that we're going to look at this morning, in his Sermon on the Mount. He's calling us up to God's higher standards, or highest standards for our life. And one of these higher standards is in our honesty. And so I want to examine these areas where Christ wants us to live differently from the world. And today's passage from the Sermon on the Mount is in Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 to 37. And as I read it, and I'll get to it later on, I just want you to take note of who he's talking about when we make an oath. Okay? Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn." But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, by the earth, for it is its footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. Wow. So let's look, first of all, what's an oath? Pretty much since time began, we have been dealing with those. They've been part of our life. Some philosophers and anthropologists, they define an oath as a ritual act. More specifically, a speech act. And taking an oath, they say, expresses a specific intention to others. And we use the words like, I promise, I swear, I vow, I pledge. And the intention when taking an oath is not limited to the moment someone speaks the words of an oath. Oath taking is also about the intention in the future to commit to act in a certain way. If you follow me on that. We make a deliberate choice, or people make a deliberate choice of their own free will. So what about oaths throughout history? Oaths and the Roman soldiers during Jesus' time. Well, in antiquity, back when Jesus was around, oaths were often demanded of religious and a lot of governmental leaders, as well as those in certain professions. In ancient Rome, oaths were demanded of their soldiers. And by the oath, soldiers swore allegiance to a specific general or a commanding consul or the emperor. And disobedience could earn very severe punishments. I believe even death in some cases. Now what about as time progressed, both in the Middle Ages? In the medieval Europe, kings took coronation oaths. They swore to rule justly and safeguard the people in their kingdom. And then it's interesting, the lesser nobles, they took oaths of service to the greater nobles, often for protection and material advantage. Religious leaders, they became part of this oath-based system as well. Breaking an oath was believed to bring down the wrath of God on you. The religious and secular worlds were closely interconnected most of those centuries, and most oaths referred to Christian beliefs. I'm sure that was brought on in a big way by Constantinople and the Crusades and all of that. But Christians took oaths in the name of God, and often while holding a religious object like a relic or of a saint or a Bible. And if you read our passage again and notice what Jesus says, don't make an oath to. To me, he's saying anything but an oath to God means nothing. And Jesus takes it a step further, meaning you need to be a person of your word. Do oaths matter? Why oaths matter? When drafting the U.S. Constitution in 1787, our founding fathers, they rejected some of the legal practices of the British law system. And one rejection was what they called the religious test. In Great Britain, all the office holders, they had to affirm the religious doctrines of the Church of England. But in the independent United States, there was no such religious restriction placed on any federal office holders because they wanted to preserve religious liberty, and that was a primary concern protected by the Constitution. And one of the British legal practices of our founding fathers, it included in the Constitution was the swearing of oaths upon entering federal governmental service. And these oaths were taken to pledge loyalty not to a single monarch in England, but here it was to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And we had swearing-in ceremonies that communicated far more. The Supreme Court justices, I don't know if you know it, and I don't know if they still do this, I'm pretty sure they do, they take two oaths, one judicial and the other is constitutional. And the oath ceremony is still a very serious thing. The appointees take these oaths in front of witnesses who are themselves representative of the entire community where they're served. Justices could be impeached by Congress for not fulfilling their oath. Again, I don't know if that's still as potent as it was back then. This year we celebrate 250 years, and these oaths of offices are still around. Now think about it in today's day and age. Presidents and other political leaders are sworn into office. Police are sworn in. That's true, right? They're still sworn in. A little pointing at Tony for those of you. You join the military. You have a swearing in. I know that because my son had to do it. We take oaths when we are a witness at a court trial. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Now the interesting thing is a lot of these oaths, the last line is, what is it? So help me God. Yes. And on and on. We stand and we say the Pledge of Allegiance here in the United States at most major events and at most schools that I'm aware of. I'm sure that there's been some frustration with that with some of the school systems, but for most, Pledge of Allegiance is still said. I did that a few weeks ago. I was at HVCA as a chapel speaker, and sure enough, they said the Pledge of Allegiance. Right after that, they said the pledge to the Christian flag. Most denominations, they have ministry vows that are made by the person being ordained. And of course, at a wedding, right? a man or a woman make vows to one another before God and witnesses. In the Boy Scouts, they actually have an oath that they have to take. This is what it says. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country and to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. I was shocked at that. I didn't realize it. I even see vows, to an extent, when you're applying to papers, when you have to get them notarized. The vows, in this sense, are agreements that are made in paper, and in most cases are binding. I know that because just this past week I had to go and get a bunch of papers notarized to send down to the state of New York for my mom's estate. And they wouldn't accept them unless they were notarized. And then there's, years ago, children would say, parents would shut the door, and they might say, I shut the door, cross my heart and hope to die. And, I never really thought about that phrase, but what I found out is that the phrase most likely originated as a religious oath based on the sign of the cross my heart, hope to die. And is generally accompanied by these hand gestures where somebody is making the cross. Pointing their hand skyward. Some people do. You see this especially a lot in athletic events. The oaths are a promise or statement to emphasize how serious we are about being honest and telling the truth. And while it's really cute sometimes when kids get up and say, give us their word. Children are, I think, subtly being taught that they have a wiggle room around their word. Taking an oath is to emphasize what we're speaking is complete truth. Because there are other times when we blur the line between truthfulness and dishonesty. And I was speaking with somebody recently, and they said to me, to be completely honest. I say that too. But what do we really mean? Maybe we say that because we know that we're never totally honest all the time to our word. So we have to put that phrase out, to be completely honest. Dave, aren't you honest all the time? Why do you have to say that? Thanks. There was a rabbinic school during Jesus' time, I talked about it last week, the Shammai sect, and they taught and believed that if you could not speak 100% truth, you shouldn't say anything. And that phrase, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, comes from that ancient school.
It comes from Bambi.
Huh?
It comes from Bambi.
Well, Bambi got it from them. But I thought about it. Isn't keeping quiet sometimes dishonest too? I don't think Jesus would have disagreed with them. But they went so far as to say, you're at a wedding and the bride comes in and you say, we would normally say, you look so beautiful. What if you didn't think that? Well, according to the Shammai, it said, you keep quiet. And then if they do ask you the truth, you have to be truthful with them. Well, no, I don't think you're very attractive. I mean, can you imagine that? So the traditional teaching that Jesus quotes here in this passage that we're looking at is a composite of ideas based on several different passages. Now, I just wrote them out for you because they're long. Leviticus 19:12, Numbers 32, Deuteronomy 23, 21 to 23. But today we live in a different world, don't we? And the idea that a person's word is their bond is no longer trustworthy. Making a deal with just a word of encouragement or a handshake, that's too trusting because, well, let's face it, it's too easy to break that bond. The reality is not new. It's been alive and well since Jesus' day. The religious leaders back then, they tried to create loopholes and distinguish different types of oaths. Jesus wanted nothing to do with that. And he said, disciples of mine are to be characterized by such honesty and integrity that an oath of any kind is completely unnecessary. Jesus says that we should have such a reputation that when we say yes, it means yes. And when we say no, it means no, and people can count on our word. James 5:12, but above all, my brothers, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. Jesus wants us to be people of integrity, people of truth. Our word is true. People can count on that. Some principles that I think we need to remember about what we say. Number one, our word is witnessed by God. He hears us, he hears our thoughts, he knows our attitudes, he wants us to be trustworthy and to be holy. Holy meaning set apart from the rest of society. What God hears is our hearts. And God wants our hearts to remain loyal to him. I'm in the midst of reading through the minor prophets during my quiet time each morning. And on Tuesday this week I read Jonah 2. I read Jonah 2, I don't know how many times. But I read Jonah 2, and to my surprise, I came across verse 9. Now, I read verse 9 probably lots of times, but it hit me. We all know the story. Jonah is directed by God to go and preach against Nineveh, and they were really bad people, violent. They were nasty, and Jonah frankly hated them, wanted them wiped out. And he fled to God to go to Tarshish, not because he was afraid, but because he was so angry. We see that in chapter 4. But in 2:9, he says this. Now, you got to remember, he's in the belly of a great fish, I'm assuming a whale. And he's sloshing around in the acidic the acidic juice, and you know, it's probably pitch black, and here he, in all of chapter 2, he's praying. He's praying to the Lord. And this is what he says at the end of the prayer. He says, what I have vowed, I will make good. Salvation comes from the Lord. What exactly was his vow? It's not specifically stated, but I think it's safe to assume that he made a vow. Probably wasn't before witnesses, but he made a vow to God that he was going to serve him with all his life. And we see his yes was yes, and it brought him to follow through on this command that he was given by God, even though he didn't want to. And again, you go to chapter 4 and you see how angry he is. Camps outside the town of Nineveh to see what's going to happen. He honestly wants them wiped out. But in chapter 4, he goes, I know that you are a compassionate and loving God. And I didn't want to do this because I knew you would relent, that you would forgive them. Now, we might slam Jonah, but here's the thing that Jonah knew God well enough to know he was commanded to go and preach against Nineveh. And he knew God well enough that he could talk to him in the belly of the whale. He knew God well enough to know that he was going to have compassion. He must have been very intimate with his Lord to know that much. But it took him getting eaten by a whale and sloshing around in its juices before he was reminded of his vow, the oath that he made between him and God. So, our word is witnessed by God. And our word should be trustworthy. There are people who have encountered who we just don't trust their word. You ever meet people like that? A couple weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, my wife and I went up to look at a used car up at Hopewell Junction. And we sat down with this guy. He didn't show us the car first. He made us sit down with him. And he was dressed really, he looked like he was about to go out and paint his house. And he sat down and talked with us for 45 minutes, and then showed us a car, and he wanted us to give a down payment on it. And we said, well, yeah, we just, we'll get back to you. And second I got in the car, my wife looked at me. Shady was her word. Shifty. And we both agreed. There's absolutely no way we're doing any business with this guy because we didn't trust his word. Our word needs to be trustworthy. A busload of politicians, they were headed to a convention, but because of highway construction, they had to take a detour down a rural road. And the driver who was driving, he got distracted. He lost control of the bus. And it ran off the road, crashed into a tree, into an old farmer's field. And there was the crashed vehicle with all these politicians. And they weren't in good shape. A lot of them passed away. The old farmer went to investigate what had happened and saw the van with all the bodies. And so he went back to his place and got a big shovel. And he buried all the politicians. And since the politicians never arrived at their destination, a state trooper came out and was dispatched to locate them. He did, and he backtracked their route, saw the wrecked bus in the field, and the trooper asked the farmer where the politicians had gone. And the farmer informed the trooper that he buried all of them. And the trooper said, "Didn't you call the coroner? After all, some of them might not have been dead." And the old farmer replied, he said, "Well, some of them kept saying that, but you know how politicians lie." Okay. People's words we don't always trust, and some, they've gotten to a point where we just don't trust them at all. God wants us to be trustworthy and holy because we represent God. Not only does it embarrass God when we don't tell the truth, it tarnishes his reputation and ours. Jesus would later condemn the Pharisees for trying to create these loopholes. And I thought, you know what? We have loopholes too. We don't like to admit that, but we do. There are several ways we can be careless with the truth, our word, on a daily basis because we don't see it as a big deal. We lie to cover up our mistakes. We exaggerate. Who has not been startled to hear yourself say something that is an exaggeration without even thinking about it? Just kind of rolls out of your mouth. It's not that you began the conversation with the intention of saying something that wasn't exactly true, but before you knew it, you found yourself embellishing the story, exaggerating it. We mislead, maybe appear better than we are, or maybe we let people think we're better than we are. Some people lie to gain advantage or to get what they want or to save face. We give false flattery. Have you ever complimented somebody when you really didn't mean it? We deceive or cheat. How many of you are familiar with the common white lies? Honest, I just need 5 minutes of your time. You ever hear that one? Or how about your table will be ready in just a few minutes? Or your check is in the mail. Or we service what we sell. Or if elected, I promise. White lies, we can call them, not a big deal. Yet what do? They destroy integrity. And it might not be in the big things, like taxes, but in the little things, like a card payment. I got to tell you, I was playing cards with my wife and my daughter and my son and their significant others, and we're playing this game, and in it I picked up my cards and I looked at the one really good card that was at the bottom of my pile, and I was tempted to just reshuffle and kind of stick that one at the top. I didn't, but I was tempted. I was tempted. What's the big deal? I'll get more points in the game. You know, because you've been there. I know, I don't even have to ask. The problem is that little things tolerated eventually seep into big things. Have you ever kept silent when you should have told the truth? And if we cannot be trusted, then the gospel we proclaim can't be heard and can't be trusted either. And the opposite is true. The honesty that we have enhances our words when we speak about the gospel. People take it to heart because, hey, that guy's an honest dude. Listen to what he has to say. 3, our word has present and eternal consequences. In any and all circumstances, we need to be a person who speaks the truth, a person who is known to be honest. And it's going to reflect not only us, but the character of God and the kingdom to which we belong. And we need to stand on our word. Yes means yes and no means no. Too many people today, they make light of the word, and what are some of the present consequences of that? First, when we lie and don't keep our promises, it destroys trust, and trust is what healthy relationships are built on. Second, it makes us an untrustworthy person, which won't just affect our relationships, but also our business and workplace and church life and any other thing that we're a part of. We earn the reputation of being dishonest. And third, this is a good point, honesty helps us grow in our relationships with Christ and with others. Ephesians 4:15, listen, it says, instead, speaking the truth in love, we will in all things grow up into him who is the head, that is Christ. And of course, it helps us in the workplace, and we earn the reputation as someone who can be trusted. Dishonesty destroys our integrity. You know, when I was building my house, I had to have Taconic come in and do some electrical stuff there. And so I told Pete when we were here, you know, he's retired. Next thing I know, he's on the phone. When we get home, those guys waiting for us from Taconic. They told us when we called, I was like a 1 week wait, 2 week wait. And those men had nothing but praises to say about Pete. I was so proud to be his friend. And they were saying, he is a straight shooting guy. He's a good guy. He's a truth teller. What are some of the eternal consequences of our word? First, dishonesty is contrary to the character of God. God is a commitment keeper. So when we say we're a Christian, but our word isn't God, or isn't good, it reflects not only on us, but also on God. Regardless if we like it or not, or if it's true or not, people may be drawn to Christ by our honesty, or steered away from him because of our dishonesty. And that's going to affect their eternity. Eternal consequence. Second, we are going to be held accountable for all our words when we stand before the Lord. I don't know about you, but this is a pretty scary quote. It's found in Matthew 12:36, and it warns, but I tell you that men will give an account on the day of judgment for every careless word they have spoken. That's scary. I've spoken a lot of careless words. Sobering reminder of the eternal significance of our words. Third, our words often lead to actions, if not always. Ecclesiastes 12:14 says, for God will bring every deed into judgment along with every hidden thing, whether good or bad. Romans 14:12. So that each of us will have to give an account of himself or herself to God. There is always a progression of consequences that follow our dishonesty. When you start to justify a little dishonesty because it seems insignificant, be careful, because you're one step closer to doing what you never thought you would do. Being a follower of Christ means a commitment to truth, to our word. We need to be people of our word. Fourth point is our word needs to be kept, even when it hurts. Maybe you regret making a promise because things didn't turn out the way that you would hope they would. Maybe when you made the promise, you would hope that you would have more time, more money, more knowledge, more energy, more whatever. You fill in the blank. Maybe you made a promise to do something because you thought you were going to get something in return. Maybe money or favors or popularity, position. And now it looks like you're going to have to do what you promised and not get anything in return. Which is untrue. There's always something in return. We just might not be able to see it at the time. Some people think that if they don't commit to anything, it's easier to get out of obligations and responsibilities that implies. But sometimes we have to make commitments, and it's our commitments that define who we are. We can make promises that we don't like, but fulfill them in ways that show our integrity, and it fortifies our witness for Christ. Once there were two brothers, and they were very rich, and they were both very wicked. And both of them lived lives that were sinful, full of debauchery, and they used their wealth to cover up all of this junk in their lives. But they were both members of the local church. And they used their money to be in positions of influence. And the old preacher at this church, he had retired, and there was a new preacher that had just been hired. And the preacher was a man who preached the gospel with zeal and courage, and he kind of lived this honest, exemplary life. And the congregation began to grow at a rapid rate, and they needed a new church building. At the same time, one of these brothers got sick and died. And the new preacher was then asked to do the funeral. And the day before the funeral service, the surviving brother pulled the preacher aside and he handed him an envelope and said, "There's a check in this envelope that's large enough to pay off the new building. All I want you to do is tell all the people at the funeral tomorrow that my brother was a saint." Do you think you can handle that, preacher? And the preacher shook his brother's hand and said, "I will do precisely what you have asked." And the preacher immediately took the check to the bank and cashed it. And the next day the preacher stood in front of a large crowd of people who had come to the funeral, and he said, "The man in the coffin was an ungodly sinner and wicked to the core. He was faithful to his wife, unfaithful to his wife, and abusive to his children. He was ruthless in business and a hypocrite in the church. But compared to his brother, he was a saint." Maybe you regret making a promise because keeping your word ends up costing you more than you expected. We still need to keep it. Proverbs 15:4 describes a righteous person, and it says, "He who keeps his oath even when it hurts." Maybe things have not turned out the way you had hoped. Keep your commitment anyway. Keep your word anyway. Keep your promises even when no one else knows. This is huge if you really think about it. How many of us have made a promise maybe to ourselves or maybe to God? No one else knows. We don't share it. And when you can't keep a promise to yourself, how's it going to be? It's going to be difficult to keep a promise to other people. After all, promises to ourselves are sometimes the hardest ones to keep. There's no accountability. There's no consequences necessarily. But remember, it's the small things. And once we start breaking promises to ourselves, it becomes much easier to break promises to others. And the same goes with our promises to God. That's why Jonah found himself sloshing around in the juices of a whale. And that's why he said, "What I have vowed, I will fulfill." Fourthly, God will hold us to our word. A few years back, two guys interviewed thousands of people, and they published their findings in a book called "The Day America Told the Truth." And of those surveyed, I don't know how many of those were, it says 91% said they lie on a regular basis. 86% said they lied to their parents regularly. Obviously, there were kids there. 75% said they lied to their friends. 69% said they lied to spouses. 50% said they regularly called into work sick when they weren't. Doug Sherman and William Hendricks, they compared the ethics of Christian and non-Christian adults, and they found that Christians were just as guilty. Eye-opening. Ephesians 4:25, it says, "Therefore each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body." In Joshua chapter 9, and I'm going to paraphrase this rather than necessarily read everything I got, I'll try to give you the passages of Scripture. A very interesting thing took place with Joshua and the people of Gibeon. In Joshua 9, 11 and 13, this is what these people from Gibeon that came into the Israel camp where Joshua was, and this is what they said to them. "Our leaders and all the people that live in our land told us to get some food ready for a trip and go and meet you. We were told to put ourselves at your service and ask you to make a treaty with us. Look at our bread. When we left home with it and started out to meet you, it was still warm. But look, now it's dry and moldy. When we filled these wineskins, they were new. But look, they're torn. Our clothes and our sandals are worn out from such a long trip." So the men of Israel made the treaty and they sampled the provisions. And it says, but they did not inquire of the Lord. We'll come back to that. So Joshua made a treaty of friendship with the people of Gibeon. He allowed them not only to live, but he and Israel, they gave their solemn promise to keep this treaty going. And in Joshua verse 9:15, Joshua made a treaty of friendship with the people of Gibeon and allowed them to live. The leaders of the community of Israel gave their solemn promises to keep the treaty. Now Israel went, they conquered Jericho and Ai, and then they moved forward to conquer more land, taking on the promised land. We all know the story. And some of the kings, they formed an alliance that would rise up against Joshua and the Israelites. But the people of Gibeon, they thought differently about it, and they sought to come under the protection of the Israelites. Even though they did it through deception, they came to them anyway. And these were the same men who came to Joshua and pretended so well, they must have been great actors, right? And saying that they were traveled from this distant land. And now they showed up to be Joshua's neighbors. And, I mean, I thought about it. If I have moldy bread, why am I going to keep it? I'm going to toss it. What the heck were they doing, Joshua? You should have picked up on that. But none of them did. None of them did. And Joshua and the Israelites got deceived, and they entered into this treaty with the Gibeon, who were actually their neighbors. And so what happened was, in Joshua 9, 18 and 20, but the Israelites could not kill them because their leaders made a solemn promise to them in the name of the Lord Israel's God. All the people complained to the leaders about this, but they answered, "We have made a solemn promise to them in the name of the Lord God of Israel. Now we cannot harm them. We must let them live because of our promise. If we don't, God will punish us." And so they kept their word. They didn't harm the people, and Joshua got his best soldiers. And sometime later, they went out and fought these 5 kings and that were coming against Gibeon. And this is what it says in Joshua 10, verse 6 and 7. "The men of Gibeon sent their word to Joshua at the camp in Gilgal. 'Do not abandon us, sir. Come at once and help us, save us. All the Amorite kings in the hill country have joined forces and have attacked us.' So Joshua and his whole army, including his best troops, started out from Gilgal. And Joshua and the leaders honored the word that they gave to the people of Gibeon, even though Gibeon deceived them. They kept their word. That's to their credit, right? Now, 400 years go by, and there's a new king in Israel called Saul. And Saul noticed that the people of Gibeon, who were foreigners and lived amongst the Israelites, and he began to get annoyed with them, and he put to death several of them. And what happened as a result of this act of King Saul? 2 Samuel 21:1. During David's reign, there was a severe famine which lasted for 3 full years. So David consulted the Lord about it, and the Lord said, Saul and his family are guilty of murder. He put the people of Gibeon to death. When David consulted the Lord told him that the famine was a consequence of the murder of the people of Gibeon during King Saul's reign. Now, interesting, even though 400 years has gone by, God was still mindful of the treaty that Joshua gave to the people of Gibeon. Sometimes we think time can take our promise, our word away. It doesn't. We see that God takes our keeping our word very seriously. God takes note of every word that we give to other people. Again, that's sometimes that's scary. I see some faces right here. God is faithful, and is faithful to keep every promise he has made to us. And as children of God, we expect God that he's going to fulfill and keep his word. We lean on that. And if we expect him to keep his word and we lean on it, shouldn't we demand it of ourselves as his children? Psalm 15:4. They always do what they promise, no matter what it may cost. David's talking about godly people. And the truth is, isn't that what the cross says to us? We sang about it. God loved us, and for some reason, he came down and died for us. And he promised to forgive all of our sins. And we trust him on that. And we feel him on that. And we experience that forgiveness. Because he always keeps his word. And he wants us